Number 1.
ARLEN was riding his white and yellow bicycle in his family's mobile home in Moscow Mills, Missouri, about 50 miles north of St. Louis, on July 25, 1991. He was last seen between 5 o'clock and 5:30 p.m. the day he vanished. ARLEN has never been heard from again. Joshua Spangler confessed to ARLEN's murder in 2001, 10 years after the child disappeared. Spangler was 13 years old at the time of the alleged killing, and he could not have served prison time for his role in the alleged crime because of his age. Spangler was apparently involved in drug activity in 1991 and was associated with George N. Gibson and his older brother, Charles Chucky Gibson. He says he sold drugs for them. Charles is currently imprisoned on federal drug and money laundering charges. Both of the Gibson brothers were initially charged in connection with ARLEN's case in the spring of 2001. Spangler told investigators that a member of ARLEN's family owed money to Charles Gibson, and Spangler was paid $10,000 to kill ARLEN as a warning. Spangler stated that he was riding in a truck with George on July 25, 1991, the day ARLEN vanished, and they abducted him and held him in a house in Davis, Missouri for a few days. He claimed he shot ARLEN in the head with a 9mm pistol in a creek bed near Davis on July 28, 3 days after the boy was abducted, and buried the body along the Mississippi River. Investigators searched a site near Winfield, Missouri in the summer of 2001 for ARLEN's remains. Nothing was located. Authorities withdrew charges against both of the Gibsons in October 2001 after learning that Spangler lied regarding their involvement in the crime. Citing numerous discrepancies in Spangler's account, they charged him with perjury in connection with his testimony about ARLEN's supposed death. Spangler pleaded guilty to perjury and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. At the time of his plea, he was serving a 4-year prison sentence for unrelated charges of burglary and evidence tampering. Authorities now believe Spangler and the Gibsons had nothing to do with ARLEN's disappearance. They say he made up the story as a malicious joke to make the police look incompetent. Authorities have not cast aside the theory that ARLEN's disappearance may have been drug-related, but his mother denies allegations that she or any of her family members were involved with drugs. ARLEN's mother describes him as a fun-loving boy who enjoyed telling stories, swimming, diving, and bike riding. His favorite school subjects in 1991 were social studies and science. He lived with his mother at the time of his disappearance. His father had died of emphysema in 1990. ARLEN's sister was murdered 10 years after his disappearance, but the crime was not related to his case. His sister was killed by her estranged husband, who subsequently committed suicide. ARLEN's mother still lives in the same trailer park where her son used to live, but in a different mobile home. Her husband's name is still listed in the phone book in case ARLEN decides to call home. In 2007, investigators began investigating Michael J. Devlin for possible involvement in ARLEN's disappearance and in several other cases, including the 1988 disappearance of Scott Kleschelt and the 2005 disappearance of Bianca Piper. Sean Hornbeck, a 15-year-old boy who disappeared at age 11 in 2002, and William Ben Ownby, a 13-year-old boy who was abducted in 2007, were both found alive in Devlin's house in January 2007. Ownby had been missing for 5 days and Hornbeck for over 4 years. Both boys had been held against their will by Devlin, who subsequently pleaded guilty to kidnapping and child molestation and was sentenced to life in prison. Authorities initially suspected Devlin could be linked to other missing child cases and formed a multi-jurisdictional task force to investigate this theory. In October 2007, the task force dissolved as it could not find any evidence that Devlin was involved in any other children's disappearances. ARLEN's bicycle was found in a bean field 3 months after his disappearance and was taken by the police as evidence. Investigators hope to identify a set of fingerprints discovered on its frame. A photo of the bicycle is posted with this case summary. ARLEN's disappearance remains unsolved.
Number 2.
Henry was last seen by her ex-husband in the afternoon of January 24, 2004 at a residence in the vicinity of the 26,000 block of Highway 17 in Waynesville, Missouri. She frequented the Columbia and Jefferson City areas of Missouri prior to her disappearance. Her ex-husband was initially unconcerned about her disappearance because he thought she might be in the hospital getting treatment for her depression. A few days before she was last seen, Henry told her sister she was going to visit a friend in Kansas City, Missouri. She said her own car was inoperable, but she planned to get a ride. Henry never made it to Kansas City. She left her purse and medication behind at home and has never been heard from again. Although she was unemployed at the time of her disappearance, Henry trained as a respiratory therapist. Her professional license, which is necessary for her to get work in that field, expired after she went missing and was never renewed. She doesn't have a driver's license in any state, and her bank accounts and social security number haven't been used since her disappearance. She also never claimed her income tax refund. Henry graduated from Lackway High School, where she was an excellent student. She left behind 2 young children. Her loved ones stated she was a devoted parent and very close to her other family members, and it's uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 3.
Hess was last seen by 2 of her children at her apartment in the 800 block of West Reed Road in Moberly, Missouri at 10:30 p.m. on June 30, 1994. Her daughter went to her home at 7:30 a.m. the next day to have breakfast with her and discovered she was gone, and the front door was ajar. Hess's bedsheet and comforter were missing, but all her other personal belongings were left behind, including her purse, car, and car keys. Blood was found at the scene. Hess's upstairs neighbor at the time of her disappearance was Larry Adams. Hess was reportedly concerned about Adams and believed he was using drugs and engaging in other illegal activities. She never reported her suspicions to law enforcement, however. Police questioned Adams about Hess's case, but they haven't said whether he's considered a suspect. In 1996, Hayes shot and wounded a police officer. He is still in prison. Hess left behind 6 adult children. She worked several jobs at the time of her disappearance, including waitressing at the Track's End restaurant and babysitting. Foul play is suspected in her disappearance. It remains unsolved.
Number 4.
Alfred was last seen with Teresa Gossage on October 9, 1976. They were students at Waynesville High School, and both were the children of officers at the Fort Leonard Wood Army Base. They left on a date in Alfred's car at 7:30 p.m. They never returned and have never been heard from again. The following day, their car was found locked and abandoned on a side road in an isolated area of Fort Leonard Wood. In spite of the freezing weather, Alfred's jacket was found in the backseat of the vehicle. His hairbrush, which he never went anywhere without, was in the console. There was no evidence of foul play. Although investigators initially thought the pair had run away, Alfred and Teresa's loved ones didn't believe this. Alfred left $1,000 behind in the bank, and he was looking forward to a hunting trip with his father and traveling to Germany for Christmas. He was a good student and planned to go to college. In January 1977, 3 teenagers were murdered at Fort Leonard Wood while out on a double date. Johnny Lee Thornton, a military police officer, pulled them over as they crossed into the fort, shot the boys to death, sexually assaulted the girls, shot them also, and dumped the 4 bodies. 1 girl from the group survived by playing dead. She walked for 6 miles to the nearest house to call for help. Thornton pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming he had multiple personalities, but was convicted and sentenced to 3 life terms plus 20 years in prison. He is considered a suspect in the disappearances of Alfred and Teresa Well. Alfred's car was found abandoned not far from where the murder victims' bodies were dumped. In spite of the circumstances, however, no evidence has been found to tie Thornton to Alfred and Teresa's disappearances. He remains in federal prison and the cases are still unsolved.
Number 5.
Jones met Brian Lee Westfall at the horse show grounds at the Hillsborough Civic Center in the vicinity of the 10,300 block of Highway 21 in Hillsborough, Missouri on August 14, 2005. She was last seen in the parking lot of the center at 5 p.m. that same day. She has never been heard from again. Jones' blue 1997 Pontiac Sunfire was later found unlocked and abandoned in the parking lot. Her purse was inside the vehicle, but keys, wallet and cellular phone were missing and have never seen again. The last time her phone was used was when she took an incoming call at 1:15 p.m. Jones claimed Westfall was the father of her unborn child, a boy whom she planned to name Hayden Lucas. Westfall and Jones had dated briefly after meeting at a party at Christmas in 2004, but their relationship didn't last long, and Westfall didn't hear from her again until February 2005, when she told him she was pregnant. Westfall stated he didn't believe Jones' unborn child was his and he didn't want to continue his relationship with Jones. Jones told friends she was considering seeking child support from Westfall. She met him on the day of her disappearance to find out what role, if any, wanted to play in the baby's life. They were supposed to have lunch together at the Off the Hook restaurant. Westfall has cooperated with the investigation and maintains his innocence in Jones' disappearance. He stated they met in the parking lot of the Hillsborough Civic Center at 1 p.m. and spoke inside their parked cars for about an hour, and when he left sometime between 4 o'clock and 5 p.m., Jones was sitting inside her car and talking to someone on her cellular phone. Police are skeptical of the story, however, because it was a very hot day and Jones' car's air conditioning was broken, and because Westfall initially told Jones' mother they had lunch together as planned and hadn't just stayed in the parking lot. Jones is divorced and left behind a young child, whom she had custody of. Her former husband is not considered a suspect in her case, and he died in November 2007. After his death, their daughter was placed in the care of her maternal grandparents. Jones was employed as a loan administrator at the Eagle Bank in Festus, Missouri in 2005. Her loved ones stated it was uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning, and she could not walk easily as a result of her pregnancy. There has been no activity on her cellular phone or credit cards since her disappearance, and no evidence that she checked into any hospital to deliver her baby. Her last known credit card purchase was at a drugstore. She bought a soda and hairspray hours before she went missing. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 6.
Kenny was last seen at her job at the Quality Convenience Store on Business 71 Highway in Nevada, Missouri on the evening of February 27, 1991. She usually worked until midnight, but it was a slow night and she evidently decided to close the store early. Her time card shows she clocked out of work at 10 p.m. and set the store alarm at 10:17. She never arrived home and has never been heard from again. Her white Chevrolet was later found abandoned in the store parking lot. The store's janitor left a few minutes before Kenny closed up. He stated there weren't any customers' cars in the parking lot when he left, but there was a male customer inside the store whom he didn't recognize. Walk-in customers weren't unusual, as there were several hotels within walking distance. The customer hasn't been identified, and it's unclear whether he had anything to do with Kenny's disappearance. Because Kenny closed the store before she disappeared, it's unlikely there was anyone still inside the store when she left. It would have been against policy for her to have let anyone in after closing. 2 witnesses in the area reported hearing a woman scream right around the time Kenny would have gone out to her car. The witnesses didn't go to the police until several days later, after they read about her disappearance in the newspapers. Authorities initially thought Kenny could have left of her own accord. Her mother had recently died, and she was upset about it. However, she was only carrying about $6 when she disappeared, and it would be uncharacteristic of her to abandon her husband, her 2 children and her father, who was ill. Kenny's case may be linked to 2 other Missouri women. Angela Hammond was abducted from a convenience store parking lot on April 4, 1991, and never heard from again. Trudy Darby, a convenience store worker in Max Creek, was abducted from her workplace on January 19, 1991, 6 weeks prior to Hammond's disappearance. The store was found robbed of $220 afterwards. Darby's nude body was found in the Little Nyangwa River 2 days later. She had been shot twice in the head. Half-brothers Jesse Rush and Marvin Cheney were later convicted of the robbery and Darby's rape and murder. There are similarities between Darby's murder, Hammond's abduction and Kenny's disappearance, but there is no hard evidence to link the cases. Kenny's disappearance remains unsolved.